Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Why Geopolitics Matter podcast, episode number 3, with the usual suspects, Antoine, Meredith, and myself, Laura. Today, we're going to go over 3 main topics. We're going to start, as usual, with Antoine, then myself, Meredith. Antoine will talk to us about the latest on the Pakistan-Afghanistan conflict. Then I will go over the energy crisis because of the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, and Meredith will tell us about the confirmation of the Serbian government's purchase of Chinese missiles. So, Antoine, what is going on lately?
Well, I'm gonna probably resume a bit what has been going on, and also to the people who have been listening to us. Pakistan led in the past week what they call strikes in strategic military sites in Kabul and also in the eastern province of Nangarhar in Afghanistan. At the same time, the Taliban government denounced strikes in a hospital in Kabul and declared 400 people killed during this attack. It's the latest report, so it's probably going to evolve as well in the coming days. And if you've listened to us during the second episode of the podcast, which I advise you to listen to, we're exactly where I saw the conflict going. So the roots of the tensions between the two countries are complex. Islamabad seems to be fighting a war against Taliban terrorists that find a refuge in Afghanistan. So in a way, they're fighting their own war on terror against Afghanistan Talibans. And the Pakistani discourse on the past strike is quite clear. It strikes first to prevent and disrupt potential attacks on its own territory. It's been quite largely impacted by the Taliban terrorist groups within Pakistan. So what we can see here is a serious intensification of the conflict, and sadly, the local population in both sides are at risk. There's already thousands of refugees that are reported, and even though China moved forward to mediate tensions between the two countries, seems unlikely to see the tensions decreasing in the coming weeks. So, yeah, once again, there's like huge backgrounds of tensions between the two countries that lead to this now increase of tensions between both Islamabad and Kabul. To be very honest, it's very sad for the local population. There's already thousands of refugees, but it's probably going to grow as well in the coming weeks. And there's a risk that the Taliban government might retaliate as well against Islamabad. So that's what's been going on in the past week in the region.
Mhm. There has also been a short ceasefire agreed, if I'm not mistaken.
It's the Muslim holiday of Eid, which is the same thing was supposed to happen in Iran, but clearly nobody is following that. Nobody tried any kind of ceasefire there with that, including on Lebanon. But for the most part, yes, there is a ceasefire that's going on right now. Because they are two majority Muslim countries who do share a very healthy historical background. The area that is in contest is over the federally administered tribal area. This is along the Durand line border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. This is an area where they had a lot of leeway. It was an autonomous zone that people could go back and forth over the border. And now that they have, they're trying to crack down on terrorism, the Pakistan government is trying to crack down on Taliban terrorism and Baluchi terrorism. They are specifically targeting this area, and it's created local instability. And a lot of these leaders, excuse me, join together so that they can fight back against Pakistan, not Pakistan, but because of the crackdown.
Yeah. The other thing that I was just thinking about this morning is that it's very difficult for a formal army like Pakistani's army to address the violence against a guerrilla type of group like the TPP because of the characteristics of asymmetric warfare, right? Because these groups are able to blend in populations, and a lot of times it is not very easy to dissociate just the civilian population from the actual members of the group. And yeah, from the Colombian perspective, that sounds very close to home because we also have that, we have a history with that kind of warfare. So if we, as Antoine was saying, the conflict will eventually keep increasing. The stakes will be higher if the Pakistani government keeps attacking civilian infrastructure or where civilians are located, which in turn is going to make the general population more resentful of the Pakistani government, and it's going to be like a vicious cycle. So hopefully that's not going to happen.
Yeah. To be very honest, from what I see, the potential getaway for both government would be to actually enact like some diplomatic move for the Taliban government to get in touch with the Pakistani government in order to have a common, let's say, a common mission to
Mm-hmm.
disarm Taliban terrorists, which seems also very complicated, knowing as well that there is the ISKP, so the Islamic State in the Khorasan province, that is
Exactly.
still active. So if both parts take, if both countries take part into joint action against terrorism, it could be a solution. But question would be, would the Taliban government agree to do so? That's a possibility as well to question.
Yeah. And if hypothetically they agree to do so, and as you were saying, they start trying to deal with the TTP, then there might be the chance that they turn against the Taliban government and trying to go on their own, and possibly aligning themselves with the ISKP.
Yeah, it's a possibility as well. So we've seen for the past 20 years that the American and the Occidental coalition tried to undermine the Taliban and fight this guerrilla warfare, and they haven't been able to defeat the Taliban, and now Taliban are in power. It seems also very complicated to deal with the guerrilla warfare in the region. So could the Taliban government with the Pakistani government effectively deal with that? That's another question.
But this
And
is also something that's been going on since the 1970s when
yeah,
Russia was working with the Mujahideen. So this isn't a new problem. This isn't a 20-year problem. This is like a 100-year problem. So that region is just the the region looks like, how it's set up, how it's very tribal, like the whole composition of that area. It's very difficult to be able to have the kind of same structures that the West has. So it's something that it's always going to be a struggle in that area. Every single country that's tried to like gain access there and get the natural resources, it's always been a struggle. So it's just like you said, but it is like it's been a long struggle.
Very complex topic. Now, let's continue with our second subject of the day, which is the energetic crisis happening because of the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. So, as a summary, the Strait of Hormuz has been effectively closed by the Iranian government under threats of attack to any vessel passing through, and as a response to the US Israeli strikes on Iran. Now, it's very important to remember that this passage is important for global economy. About 20 million barrels of oil per day go through this strait, meaning it's about 20% of the global supply passing through. Which makes the situation even more serious is not only the blockade, I would say, it's also the attack on the energy infrastructure themselves. So most namely the Qatar Ras Laffan industrial city, which is responsible for 20% of the LNG global supply only. And which means that adds a new level of, let's say, uncertainty because of the time that it takes to the infrastructure and the systems involved to get back online. This means that there will be a long-term effect, even if there is a hypothetical ceasefire tomorrow. There is an estimate saying that it would take about 6 months for the affected infrastructure to get back online. So if this continues going further, we will see even more delays, which is very worrying. So in response to the ongoing crisis, governments and international institutions reacted in panic mode, in emergency mode. So one of the decisions made by the IEA was to release 400 million barrels of oil to try to control the probable inflation effects on prices, which, let's say, it's good news. According to the IEA director, it's only 20% of the reserves that there are available. That might be true, or that might be in order to give some reassurance to the energy markets, which is also another important factor to take into account, the reaction of the markets themselves. Now, countries are implementing as well solutions like fuel rationing, tax reductions on energy like Spain is doing, or even like in Philippines, governments have declared shorter work weeks. So 4-day work weeks, for example. There are other discussions that are more delicate, which, for example, are the idea of releasing sanctions on Russian oil and gas. So the US already made their move. They lifted some sanctions, which apparently are going to be short term. But like, again, without knowing how long the conflict would last, those sanctions could last longer. But European governments are very united in that respect. They have said, we are going to keep the pressure on the Russian oil and gas, on the Russian energy, because it would be basically just throwing out the window all the effort that Europe went through these past years to basically disengage from Russian energy. And I guess that is one of the most important questions. So what do you guys think? Do you think that if the conflict continues going longer, we might see governments more leaning to lift sanctions? I don't think so personally, but what do you guys think?
I think on a European perspective, it's not very probable that the European governments will ease the sanctions on Russia. It's been 4 years now that the war has gone on, so it's very less likely to happen.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know that, for example, France has been still getting some of its uranium from Russia. There's been some activists from Greenpeace who conducted some operations in northern France against these transactions. So it's also something that has to be taken into account. There's some undergoing ways for European countries to get access to some energy, and even though it won't come from the Strait of Hormuz, there will be other ways to get it somewhere else. Probably not from Russia, but there's also the possibility of countries from the Caucasus, for example, that is still very critical. So yeah, definitely not Russia for European countries, but possibilities exist.
Yeah, the head of the IEA has held conversations with countries like Norway, Brazil, Canada to try and put some effort in oil and gas production so that, yeah, there's more coverage of the demand needed. Now, there is another, let's say, fear in the energy market, which is that Asian countries depend a lot on the oil and gas coming from the Middle East. And if with the reduction of the supply, then we will be in a kind of a contest between Asian countries and European countries trying to bid for the energy available in the market. So that would mean higher costs, or like who can pay more for energy, because that's eventually how energy markets work, right? Because it's a market itself. So whoever offers more, you're gonna get your oil or your gas most likely.
Today, well, I was reading this morning about the response from the Trump administration. They issued an ultimatum that was warning that U.S. forces would obliterate Iran power plants if the country didn't open the strait within 48 hours. The Iranian officials appeared to respond with their own warning and threatened to target U.S. and allied energy assets in the region if their facilities were attacked. Israel was attacked. I can't remember the name of the city, but it seems that they did extensive damage, as there was not any way for their defenses to go up in time. I thought that would be interesting note to point out, but I also wanted to follow up that there is a lot of LNG that's coming out of the United States. The U.S. has also lifted sanctions oil in Venezuela, so that it would go through a U.S. bank account, but certain countries are blocked. China was one of them. But China, Japan, India, and Pakistan are on the list of countries that do have authorized passage through the strait. So within the last couple of days, these countries have been able to get some of the energy products that they're looking for to come through. They may not have come from Iran. They may have come from other countries. But it is important to say that a lot of the Japan and India mainly have been trying to thread the line between keeping both sides happy with Iran and the US.
Yeah. Thanks for the note, Meredith. Now I think we can continue to our last topic. So take it over, Meredith.
So Serbia is not a NATO country, it's a NATO partner, which is very important to point out. So they're very European Union friendly. They are trying to join the Union. They haven't met all of their criteria, but the recent weeks there has been a leak of photos where the country has purchased Chinese CM-400 AKG air-to-surface ballistic missiles for its Air Force, and they are striving to balance the partnership with NATO, and they have aspirations to join the European Union with its because they have a lot of cultural, ethnic, and political alliances. But there's also the other side where they are very close to Russia and they have strategic ties with China, who happens to be a major investor. This is a case of an armed non-alignment, and they're building military capabilities designed to preserve strategic autonomy rather than relying exclusively on any single alliance structure. So they're trying to diversify all of the products that they have, which is something that Indonesia has done in the past. So they're not taking cues, but they're watching other countries kind of diversify what kind of products these products don't usually work together, but having a blanket coverage of having different kinds of military capabilities does kind of bolster your defenses. Western aircrafts and Chinese missiles, Israeli drone technologies, and domestic command systems all together in this diversified military ecosystem has a lot of the neighbors very nervous. The Serbian officials have also expressed concern about emerging regional defense cooperation initiatives, including military cooperation between Croatia, Albania, and Kosovo. This multipolar security order is which seeks to diversify the partnerships while maintaining sovereign capabilities so that they're able to reach out to different partners at different times. And this evolving relationship with Beijing is not only reshaping Serbia's defense capability, but also reflects its ongoing effort to balance geopolitical loyalties, a balancing act that eventually may attract sharper attention from Brussels and Washington. It is very significant. A lot of people are still alive from the 1990s who understand what they went through when the NATO invasion happened in the Balkans. So it is something that a lot of these other countries are looking out for. Seeing this buildup of military infrastructure is making a lot of their neighbors worried and trying to figure out whether or not they're really interested in cooperating and being on what their future plans are too.
My biggest question was how effective could the Chinese military equipment be in the battlefield? Because there has been some talks about not being very effective when it comes to important or decisive moments. Like other Chinese equipment has been used in last year, actually, in the Pakistan and Afghanistan conflict. Like defense systems don't work quite well. Iran has also gotten components for their defense systems from China. Maybe not the finalized product, but yes, several components from them. And we have seen that with the recent strikes, they don't work quite well. So my take is that on paper, it adds more weight to Serbia's capabilities, but if a conflict took place, it might not be as efficient as the government would like them to be.
Yeah, and they did do some joint exercises together, Serbia and China last year before these photos leaked out recently. But uh, I don't know very much about military products, but I think it's more of the, hey, we've got some of this too. And it's kind of spreading your bases and getting friendly with a major investor in the country and trying to build those relationships. It may be that they don't work, but they at least have somebody that they can call.
It's also a thing like on the Serbian society in the past years. There's been the collapse of the train station that was built by a Chinese company.
Yeah.
So it's also very, I would say, rooted now in the youngest generations of the Serbian society, that China might not be as reliable as the government tries to say. On the other hand, on what you say about the Chinese weapon systems, there is quite important phrase coming from a former Chinese admiral that went into retirement, and that said that one of his biggest deception was that he never saw conflict. And that's also something that is very important for any weapon system in any military in the world, is that as long as your weapon hasn't been tested on the ground, you cannot really fully rely on it in the way that it's not battle approved. So there's also, I would say it's most likely a political way of getting
Yeah.
closer to China, and also because Serbia is already close to Russia. So keeping close allies of allies is also like quite a logical political move from the Serbian government. But on the other hand, will the Serbian society continues to follow on that? It's also a question that might be asked from what they experienced with the collapse of the train station.
Yeah, because the president of the country was on the verge of not
Yeah.
running anymore because of that collapse and all of the protests that followed. So, yeah, you're absolutely right that he's got to walk a really tight line and try to keep things quiet. That's why the photos were leaked and not reported.
Yeah, exactly.
You're absolutely right.
There was an interview of the Serbian president from back in January when the tensions in Iran were escalating, and he said that basically he felt like, as we all do, the international arena is quite unstable at the moment. So you could argue that he feels that arming the country or preparing for whatever comes next is a completely valid idea. So, yeah, I think that feeling will go throughout the world for different countries and governments, even the public themselves. Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for your input and insights on these 3 topics. As usual, you can find us in any podcast platform of your choice, wherever you get your podcast. So make sure to keep track of our episodes, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.
Bye.
For more articles on why geopolitics matters, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at whygeopoliticsmatter.com.